this is two guys talking. And as a prose novelist myself, you're the first graphic novelist I've ever met, and I have about 20
Don't
years
get your
worth
hopes
of.
up.
No, well, I've years worth of questions stored up as to how your form works versus my form that I'd finally be able to get to answer. So I'm excited. So thanks for being here, and
Well,
we
thank
can
you for having
just
me.
go right in. Like I said, the format is just going to be easy. It's just you and me talking. All right. Well, what about protecting your work? It seems it's one thing, and on the pro side of things, to copyright your manuscript, there's a precedent, there's an agency, there's hoops you can jump through to make sure your stuff ends up protected by Uncle Sam. But a visual narrative, I think, is much more difficult to protect because people can see it, they can remember it, they can go and reproduce it elsewhere. So how do you protect your own creation?
A lot of people in comics, probably about half of the artists right now, if you've ever heard of a guy named Jim Lee, he kind of came up in the 90s and revolutionized the visual style to a degree. A lot of people are very derivative of him. So they're kind of cloney in a lot of ways, some more than others. So he really influenced the entire medium that way, well, half the medium. I mean, he has no basis to be able to claim copyright to that stuff. He can just say, "Yeah, I see you're copying me that way, the way I do my art." That's about it. So.
Can you tell me more about how Jim Lee revolutionized the form? Because I know that when I was a kid, comics followed a very standard formula, which was one panel beget another. It was in sequence. There was no moving around. The art was it was outlined, filled in, light wash color. It was very cookie cutter mold, mass production oriented. Sometime, I think around the late 80s or early 90s, around the time a graphic novel called Arkham Asylum was published, it seemed like the form really was exploded, widened, and all sorts of new possibilities came around because suddenly the panels were liberated from the sequence and each panel became a story in and of itself. How did that happen?
Printing techniques got better. Computers came on board and changed the whole coloring system of comics. You get more tones and gradients, and you can literally reproduce paintings in comic form as cheaply as they used to with the old newsprint and the little dots of the color that used to be there. I don't know how many comics you've read, but there's a guy called Jack Kirby, and he did revolutionize in some ways the visuals of comic books with like big characters coming out of panels and very dynamic storytelling, and his style was its own. So he influenced a lot of modern day creators. Comics has been a very stunted medium in America for a very long time, in that it nearly died for a while thanks to censorship and a crazy psychologist guy named Dr. Wortham, who thought that comics would make kids criminals, basically, and that you can't have anything naughty in them, and no swearing, and nothing evil or remotely mature. So that really stunted comics for a long time, and they came up with this thing called the Comics Code, where you couldn't even have things like drug references or police portrayed in a bad light because they're authority figures. So comics have had to deal with that for a long time. They got rid of the Comics Code, I think, a few years ago, but that really limited them to their base readership, which was superhero people. So for the longest time, comics were only superhero stuff. And so the last 20 years, I guess, has been a progression of, we can do these sort of things and tell these sorts of stories in comics. And Arkham Asylum is a superhero, it's a Batman story. But it was a lot more intelligent, a lot darker, and the art was literally painted instead of just the traditional pen and ink and computer coloring. So it did break the mold that way. It's one of the biggest selling comics of all time, I think. It's definitely sold well over a couple of million by now.
How does the process of structuring a plot work when you create one of your stories? I know how this works from the prose side of things, and it involves sitting down and doodling on a lot of legal pads. But how would you say that? How does that take place structurally when you have not only the narrative element but the visual element to construct simultaneously?
Well, I could only speak for myself. And as for myself, so I'm a visual person, I'm an artist, so I see everything in my head the way I would like to get it out on paper. I see everything as kind of like cinematically as movies anyway, so if I have a story I want to do, I basically just come up with a story and I jot down all the plot points, try to work that out. There's no visuals in that. I mean, I see them in my head as I'm writing, the same way you probably see a scene as you're writing. But then I actually, after that, I write stream of conscious dialogue, only dialogue, because I can see in my head what I want to draw for each scene. And it's like I have enough memory triggers to know exactly what I was doing or wanted, as I'm just writing a stream of conscious dialogue of the whole thing, basically, the whole issue, based on the plot points. And then I go to layouts based on the dialogue, because to me dialogue's key, and I want to get the expressions right on the faces, and then there's timing issues because of the visual nature. So it's like maybe this guy has the same panel for like 3 panels because he's waiting and he's pausing and you want to give a sense of time. So I mean, to me, that's where it comes together, is the layouts. I do layout thumbnails of the whole page, and once that's done, the whole comic's done, and I just have to draw.
Given I have read several of your series, and
I'm so
the
sorry.
attrition rate could be rather high. Are there any characters? Do you ever revisit characters? Do you resuscitate characters beyond this series?
No. You've read, I think, Welcome to Hoxford, which was like about werewolves in a prison situation. I can't take any of them and put that in anything else, because that property is co-owned with someone, and the intellectual property rights are all wrapped up with someone. Only more recently do I actually own and control 100% of what I do.
Do you have an ideal project in mind that you're working toward?
Nope. I've done everything I ever wanted to do. I had a movie made out of one of the books that I drew. I didn't write it, I drew it. So it's a collaboration. But I just like telling my own stories when they come to me and putting them out for the world. And thankfully, I have enough people in an audience right now that would like to buy that I can pay my rent.
We are done, Mr. Templesmith. I think we got everything that we finally need. Yeah, thanks a lot, and I really enjoy your work. Keep up the good work, please do. You've been an
I'll
inspiration.
try. I can't do anything else.
Well,
Got to pay
I
my
look
rent.
forward to the next one.
Thank you. Thank you very much.